Welcome back to another episode of MI for Change. I'm your host, Germanica Gilbert, and today we're going to do things a little different. We are going to answer some case scenarios about supervisees, about parents, about clients and team members, and I'm going to be using my motivational interviewing deck cards to come up with some affirmations as well. So let's listen to some of these scenarios. I'm sure you can definitely relate to some of these. If you can, put it in the comment. I always like to see which ones are more relatable than others. I, for one, can relate, I think, to each one of these. So let's go over the first one. Let's call the first one the resistant parent. A BCBA introduces a new data collection sheet for home use. The parent sighs, crosses her arms, and mutters, "We've tried this before. None of it works. My kid doesn't respond to charts or stickers." She scrolls on her phone midway session. The BCBA feels their chest tighten and fights that urge to prove the plan works. Instead, she engages in an MI consistent argument or an "am I consistent" comment. Now, here we can sense the frustration and the defensiveness and that want for control. So, what we want to do is that we want to reflect this discouragement that the parent is feeling, and we also want to evoke their efforts. So, we may say something along the lines of, "You put in a lot of time and energy, and it's discouraging to feel like nothing's working. What's kept you going, even when it's been tough?" So here we are reflecting on what the parent is feeling, and we are also slightly pushing them towards that change, towards the topic of let's talk about what you've done in the past when things have been tough, just like they are now. And maybe we can find a way to move past this. An affirmation that you can use with this parent is change can be tough. And it's really great that you're being honest about not having the time right now. It shows how committed you are to diving in when you are ready. So, this is an affirmation that you can use with this parent. Of course, we can always tweak this a little bit so it makes more sense. All right, this is the second scenario. This is a hopeless parent. A mom sits at the kitchen table, eyes glassy. "We've had 3 therapists, 2 programs, and he's still the same. Maybe this is just who he is. Nothing's ever going to change." The therapist feels her heart sink. They want to remind her of the progress, but sense she doesn't have the bandwidth to hear it. Here we see that sense of despair, of fatigue, and of emotional drainage. So the therapist can say something like, "It sounds like you've been carrying this for a long time. What keeps you showing up, even when it feels like nothing's changing?" So again, we want to highlight that the mom is persistent and she continues to show up even when she doesn't see things changing. An affirmation that you can use with this mom is, "You've had a setback, but you're really trying. Let's look at the progress you're making or the progress that you've made so far." Okay, the third is the overwhelmed parent. Tears roll down the parent's cheeks. "Between work, therapy, and school, I'm done. I can't keep this up." Her voice cracks. She's not angry, just empty. The therapist hesitates, push forward, or do I let her breathe? Now, here we can sense that sense of overload, empathy, and also like that need for some small wins that the therapist may be feeling. So, an "am I consistent" response may be something like, "You're balancing so much and still showing up. If we could focus on just one thing that would make this week a little lighter, what would that be?" Sometimes when parents are overwhelmed, it's very difficult to just focus on all of these interventions or all of these programs. So we want to emphasize that she is doing a good job and she is trying her best to balance all these things. We acknowledge that. So let's break it down. Let's break it down so we're just focusing on one behavior, on one intervention. An affirmation you can also use is, "You are here today," and that shows a lot of commitment. Even showing up to that parent coaching session when feeling overwhelmed definitely shows that sense of commitment. Next, this is the over involved dad. During the session, the dad hovers over his son, correcting every step. "Say it right. No, not like that. Like we practiced." The child freezes, eyes darting toward the therapist for help. After session, the dad smiles proudly. "See, I keep him in check." So here we can sense that feeling of wanting to control, really having good intentions, and unintentionally interference in the session and in the child's progress. An MI consistent comment that we can make is, you really want him to succeed. That shows how involved you are. How do you think he feels when you jump in before he answers? And I love this question because it's a very thought provoking question. And it allows the parent to get in the child's shoes, like actually be in, like understand what that child is feeling when he tends to jump in. Sometimes we think this happens automatically, and sometimes it doesn't. We have to probe it. We have to somehow hint it so that the other person understands. An affirmation that you can use with this parent is, your hesitations are understandable and they reflect your commitment to ensuring that any changes truly benefit your child. Here's another one, the parent who blames the school. I'm sure we've had that. A lot of parents, and don't get me wrong, some schools are not doing what they are supposed to be doing. I totally get it. But we all have had also parents that sometimes they don't take responsibility for what's going on at home, or they say things like, well, at home, everything is great. And in schools where you see a lot of the behaviors, well, of course, at schools where they're in a social setting, at school, they're having them do things that are aversive, they really don't want to do. At home, they're just, laying back and just relaxing and doing whatever they want to do. Obviously we are going to see more behavior and challenging behaviors in the school setting than in the home setting. But anyways, this is a parent who tends to blame the school. Let's see what they say. Every meeting starts the same. He's fine at home. The school's a problem. The BCBA can't redirect without hitting a wall. The parent's anger at the teacher overshadows everything. So here we have that sense of defensiveness, shifting the focus, and invalidation. So, what we want to do is we want to reflect on what's going on or what that parent is feeling and redirect them gently. Something we know as agreeing with a twist. You see such a big difference between home and school. What's working for him at home that we could share with the teacher? So, this is a statement that you can make which allows that cohesion between school and home. So, what are some things that are working at home that we can share with the teacher? What are some things that you do that perhaps the teacher doesn't know about? Maybe we can bring both worlds together and make it happen. An affirmation you can use is, you know your child better than anyone else. Your understanding of their needs and strengths is invaluable. In order for the teacher to start understanding him a little better or even managing his behavior with more effectiveness, you're going to have to be the key player in this process. Okay, now we have the minimizing parent. And this is the parent that just says things like, he's a boy, he's going to grow out of it. In an intake session, a mom chuckles, he's just a boy, he'll grow out of it. My husband was the same way when he was younger. The therapist wants to discuss the diagnosis, but senses that wall, that denial. So here we want to acknowledge the parent's perspective and invite a reflection. Again, if this parent is in that pre-contemplative stage or in that denial stage, we don't want to come in too strong and start talking about the interventions, or if we're communicating a diagnosis, we don't want to all of a sudden let them know what we're thinking. So something we can say is, you see his behavior as part of who he is. What would make you start to wonder if he might need a little extra support? This is a really good question. Something else you can say is, if the behaviors weren't happening now, how would your life be different? This is a good reflection, and it's actually called a miracle question. So, how would your life be different if this wasn't an issue or if this behavior wasn't a challenge? And here, what we want is for the parent to respond with, well, I guess we would be able to travel more often. I really love to travel, and I haven't been able to go anywhere because it's such a fuss all the time with his behaviors. So, right there, they're engaging in more of that change talk, which is what we want during the session. And we want to tilt it towards those vocalizations towards that change. Here we have the fearful parent. The child cries during a simple demand and the mom rushes in. Please stop crying. You can have it. Just calm down. She looks ashamed, whispering, I just can't handle it when he cries. So here we can tell there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of projection, and really the mom is trying to protect her child and herself and probably feels a lot of guilt. So what we want to do is that we want to validate the mom's emotion and explore the values. So something like we would say something like it's painful to see him upset. You want to comfort him. What do you hope he learns in moments like that? So again, we want to emphasize what is he learning this moment? And in some way that's a reflection for the future. So in moments like this, what are the things that he's learning and what do you anticipate will happen in the future if he uses the same behavior at school or with his friends or even when he's an adult and he's out there in the world? So we want to kind of like talk about those future consequences and bring them to the reality of the now. An affirmation you can use is no one knows your child like you do. If our sessions are going to work, you will need to be the key player in this process. So, mom, you are also part of this. Next, we have the defensive couple. In session, tension crackles. Dad says he acts up because she spoils him. Mom says, you're never even home to help. The therapist data sheet is forgotten as voice rise. So here they are going back and forth on each other. So here we see that triangulation, blame cycle, some emotions going strong, and the therapist in the middle trying to redirect them or restore some sense of peace. So what we want to do in this situation is reflect the shared concern and values and try to find a unity for both parents' goals. Most of the time, I would say maybe every time, the parents really want the same thing for their child. They want them to be safe, they want them to be happy, and they want them to achieve some signs or some behaviors that are related to being independent in the future. So these are some shared goals that I think most parents want. Something you can say is you both care about helping him, even when you see the path differently. What's one small thing you could agree on this week? So again, we are acknowledging that they may be seeing things differently, and then we are merging them together, and we're ending up with this kind of we're ending up with this question towards that change, towards what we want to see. What's one small thing you can agree on this week? And after that, we can try to get a commitment. What's one small step you can do to get to that thing you wanted to see this week? An affirmation can be change can be tough. And in these interventions are an affirmation you can use is change can be tough. And these interventions aren't always easy, but you've already taken the first step. And that's a big deal. Even meeting with me today, both of you, that is a big step towards that partnership that you want to work on in order to work together towards your child's goals. So that's something you can add at the end. Okay, now let's go into supervisees. This is a defensive supervisee. After session feedback, the supervisor says, you interrupted the parents several times. The supervisee stiffens and says, I was just trying to help. So here, what you want to do is affirm the intent and invite a reflection. Something you might say is, you wanted to make sure she understood. Your intentions were good. What do you think she experienced in that moment when you did interrupt her? So again, we want the supervisee to reflect on it herself instead of us telling her what happened. And a reflection that we can use is maintaining consistency can be tough, and the effort you're putting in demonstrates your commitment to your client's growth. An affirmation you can use is maintaining consistency can be tough, and the effort you're putting in demonstrates your commitment to your client's growth. The passive supervisee. This is a supervisee where all of the questions are met with whatever you think is best. The supervisor senses insecurity masked as politeness. So here we want to emphasize and support autonomy and also evoke their voice, their own thoughts. Something you can say is, you really value guidance. I love to hear what part of this plan feels more like your approach. Or what are some things that you think we should tweak? So it's better. I know you have great ideas. Let's put them to work. Let's work on this together. Here's an affirmation that you can also use. Every small step you take is a step towards that positive change. Here we have the overconfident supervisee. We love those. So this supervisee says something like, I already use MI. I just tell parents what motivates them. The supervisor smiles knowingly. Something we can say is, you clearly care about helping parents feel motivated. How do you usually figure out what matters more to them? So again, this supervisor is saying, I use MI all the time. I let them know what motivates them. Now, if you've been listening to these episodes for a while, you know that that is not the way that we MI. And instead, we want to draw that out from parents. And using or saying something like, how do you usually figure out what matters most to them? The supervisee will probably respond by saying something like, well, I don't know. She may say, I don't really know. I come up with it myself. And right there, that's a conversation that you can have with her. Or she may say, well, you know what? I've never really asked them what motivates them. And right there, that's a great aha moment where you can talk a little bit about asking open ended questions. So let's try using more open ended questions so we can find out what really matters to that parent. Okay, so this is the burnt out BCBA. So in a peer meeting, a BCBA cites, I'm tired of caring more than the parents. I'm losing my spark. So here we can see the burnout and that loss of just wanting to continue or motivated. So we want to reflect back on the meaning and reconnect with the values. Something we can say is, you've given so much and it's taking a toll. What used to make this work and feel meaningful to you? An affirmation that we can use is, you have the strength and resilience to handle these situations, even when it feels tough. So, again, this is an affirmation that we can use with this reflection as well. Then we have the resistant team member. In a staff meeting, an RBT mutters, we've always done it this way. So, here you can respond with, doing things the usual way feels safe and predictable. What might be worth trying, just as an experiment? So, again, we're kind of like rolling with that resistance. An affirmation that you can use for this supervisee is, your experience as an RBT gives you unique insight. Let's explore those together. Here we have the eager to please intern. So this is an intern that for every piece of the feedback, she or he always says, got it, but nothing really changes. When asked why, the intern admits, I just didn't want you to think I was bad at this. So here we want to affirm honesty and also evoke autonomy. We may say something like, you really care about doing a good job. What would help you feel more confident or confident enough to try new things, even if it's messy at first? So, again, we want them to feel confident and also take that autonomy. So, this is an affirmation that we can use. It's clear that you love and want the best for your client. And that's a powerful foundation for change. All right, now we have the conflict-avoidant supervisor. A BCBA hesitates to address a therapist's chronic lateness. I don't want to upset her or make things awkward, she says. Okay, so here, something you can say is, you want to keep the relationship positive. What might happen if the issue keeps going unspoken? This is something that I've come across a lot where we've had supervisors that want to build a good rapport with the RBT or with the intern, and they don't want to say anything that's going to sound conflicting or that may change that relationship. Maybe they fear that it may change that relationship. So when you are providing oversight for these supervisors, or if this is your colleague, this is a very powerful question. What might happen if the issue keeps going unspoken? We want to tie in the future consequence of this unchanged behavior. So, what happens if you continue to not address this? What's going to be the impact of this to your client? What's going to be the impact for you or the company? So this is a really good question to ask to evoke that sense of like, okay, I see the consequences of what may happen and I'm seeing them now today. Here is an affirmation you can use. It's okay to question the effectiveness of certain strategies. Exploring options with a critical eye can lead to a better understanding of the therapist needs. So here, the reason why I said it slowly is because it says the child's needs. But again, the way that you can use these cards is that you can always substitute one thing for the other. So again, I'll read it again because I know it was a little choppy. It's okay to question the effectiveness of certain strategies. Exploring options with a critical eye can lead to a better understanding of your therapist's needs. Okay? All right. So, the ambivalent teen. This is a teen that says something like, yeah, I should stop vaping, but it helps me chill. So here we can use a double sided reflection. Something like, part of you wants to stop and another part relies on it to cope. So again, we are using a double-sided reflection because we want to present the sustained talk, which or the sustained behavior, which is part of you wants to stop and another part relies on it to cope. That other part of this sentence, which says, and another part of you relies on it to cope, may trigger something. Maybe I am coping. Well, what are you coping for? Let's have a conversation of what you think you're coping. What do you think you're coping? um what do you think you're using this to cope for, and maybe there's something that's underlining that we should take care of so you don't have to vape just to cope with this situation. All right. So that is it for today. I hope that you enjoyed these scenarios. If you have any scenarios that you are, or examples, or even if it's real life examples, don't worry, just don't put the person's real name here in the comments. But I would love for you to share them here, and maybe I can make a part two and go over those scenarios on our next chat together. So thank you all for being here. I hope you found value as always. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of MI for Change. If you're ready to keep growing your motivational interviewing skills, I'd love to invite you to explore my MI Academy, where you'll find a full library of on-demand courses designed to help you put MI into practice with confidence. You can learn more at www.drmonicagilbert.com. Until next time, keep asking the questions that spark change.